Researchers in Turkey are about to embark on an excavation at the ancient site of Karahantepe, and they believe it's much older than Göbekli Tepe, the famous zero point of world history. If you were to ask any professor of history or even a self-respecting armchair archaeologist to name the oldest monument ever discovered, they would have all said Göbekli Tepe. But now, that answer might be Karahantepe, and this is creating a lot of excitement in archaeological circles. Karahantepe is said to be much older than Göbekli Tepe. Archaeologists have been working at the Karahantepe site, which is often called the sister site of Göbekli Tepe, since 1997. The site is located near Yagmulu and roughly 35 kilometers east of the 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe site. Over the years, archaeologists have made a series of amazing discoveries at the Karahantepe site. In particular, tons of buried T-shaped obelisks, similar to the ones carved with wild animals at Göbekli Tepe, have led researchers to conclude that Karahantepe is much older than its younger sister, Göbekli Tepe. Head of excavations at Karahantepe, Dr. Nesmi Karul, said that 12 spots estimated to be in the same period as Göbekli Tepe are now known in the region, one of which is the Karahantepe. Speaking at the 10th International Resort Tourism Congress, Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Esroy said that an intensive and rapid excavation program continues in Karahantepe, which to date has yielded 250 obelisks featuring animal figures. Esroy claims that planned excavations will prove the settlement at Karahantepe will be much older than the 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe. A 2016 National Geographic article recounted the fascinating story of the discovery and preservation of Göbekli Tepe. Professor Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist who led excavations at the site, argued before he died in 2014 that a vast labor force needed to build the enclosures, and that this construction project pushed people to develop agriculture as a way of providing predictable food and perhaps drink for workers. At the 2015 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Turkey's Dogus Group announced that they plan to spend $15 million over the next 20 years in partnership with the National Geographic Society on the Göbekli Tepe site. And Dogus Group chairman Ferit İhsanek said in a press release that the reason so much cash was being spent on Göbekli Tepe was because this prehistoric temple was the zero point in time. Karahantepe may well be Göbekli Tepe's older sister. While Göbekli Tepe holds the world record in media headlines and elsewhere as the earliest temple of its type ever discovered, there are several other contenders for this crown in Turkey. According to Jens Nottroff, an archaeologist at the German Archaeological Institute who is working on Göbekli Tepe site, smaller versions of the pillars, symbols and architecture carved into stone at Göbekli Tepe have been found in settlements up to 125 miles away, including Karahantepe. Professor Nottroff told National Geographic that Göbekli Tepe probably served the region as a cathedral, and therefore the surrounding sacred sites were like parish churches. The scientist also thinks hunter-gatherers traveled long distances to meet, worship, and help build new monumental structures through vast community projects that included grand feasts to display wealth. Returning to Karahantepe, according to a report in Daily Sabah, many more years of excavations and research must be conducted to determine what exactly it was used for. However, while it does happen, scientists seldom make big claims without equally big proof, and in this instance, the researchers think that when they ultimately get to Karahantepe's excavation center, it will be much older than 12,000 years. The archaeologists at Karahantepe are also convinced that they have a new zero point in world history. The mayor says the site will become a priority in place of Göbekli Tepe, and it will become a new focus of national archaeological and tourist attention. Karahantepe is the sister to the enigmatic Göbekli Tepe that sits around 23 miles southeast of Göbekli upon an elevated limestone ridge. It has many striking similarities to Göbekli. Firstly, it consists of T-shaped pillars, 266 of them that mostly form parallel rows. The pillars have relief carvings, and the site appears, like Göbekli, to be deliberately buried under a great artificial mound. Although this could be natural, as after 10,500 years of accumulation of dirt, combined with high winds, could have covered it back up. The comparisons do not end there. It also has serpent relief carvings, strange rock indentations, large cut marks, porthole stones, and an unfinished T-shaped pillar still in the quarry, the focus of this article. Karahantepe was first discovered in 1997 and was surveyed in 2000 and again in 2011. Like Göbekli Tepe, it's located within the boundaries of Sanliurfa, ancient Edessa, the birthplace of Abraham, around 30 miles from the city. It's not an officially recognized tourist site, so they had to plan their trip carefully as it was on private land upon the Tek Mountains. Fortunately, a well-placed, probably modern standing stone marked the entrance to the track that led to the farm that is located behind. When Andrew Collins visited there in 2004, the person who showed him around was warned he would get a beating if they found anyone had visited there. 10 years later, and the owners welcomed the occasional visitor with tea and information. No beatings entailed, just sweet hot beverages and conversation after the morning visit. The dating of the site is impressive, as it's dated to 8,500 BC, contemporary with the now submerged Navali Quarry and the later stages of Göbekli Tepe. There are obvious similarities to these and other sites in the vicinity, but we've heard that there was a quarry on site where an unfinished T-shaped pillar still sits within the bedrock. Kevin Fish diligently searched for it with only one clue: that it was directly to the west of the main enclosure, as mentioned in the 2011 report. Kevin eventually converged at the impressive monolith. It lies on a rock face sloping 30 degrees towards the setting sun. At 18 feet long, it would have probably been the largest monolith at the site. The site is not excavated yet, so this can't be confirmed, and weighs in at around 30 to 40 tons. Its downward angle on the slope on natural exposed rock face may have been why this was a preferred spot to quarry from. As archaeologist Bahattin Selik explains, this is quite a practical technique, with roughly chiseling on the side of the rock to produce a T-shape, whilst carving the other side 40 centimeters wide and 1 meter deep. The solid pillar separated from the bedrock with this technique and can easily be removed from the quarry with the help of a slope. Andrew Collins decided to measure it and discovered it was indeed 18 feet, 5.5 meters in length, with a maximum width of 6.6 feet, 2 meters, across its T-shaped head. This is similar in size to the twin monoliths at the center of Göbekli's enclosure, C and D. The weathering was very bad, much like the exposed parts of the pillars on the main hill. However, what lies underneath could be as well preserved as Göbekli Tepe. Altogether, Karahantepe is a fascinating site that begs excavation, as the significance of the nearby Göbekli Tepe has now hit the headlines. After leaving the site, the visitor wondered if the location of the choice of rock was significant. Was the direction of the quarry from the main temple an indication of a tradition that existed as far back as 10,500 years ago? Andrew Collins discussed the possibility that, indeed, it could be the case, as bringing quarried stone from the west to the east may represent bringing it into the light, sunrise, from darkness, the sunset. However, the remaining 14-foot pillar still on the eastern slope had further avenues slightly further east of it, so again it showed a possible west to east movement. Alternatively, it could also represent an east to west direction from the smaller quarry to the main enclosure. After searching through some Masonic texts, a reference was found to a ceremony where the initiate had to move in that direction, east to west. Why this is, perhaps, could represent facing one's own death, as initiation rites such as these are often about facing deep-rooted fears. Whether this was on the minds of the builders of Karahantepe, we'll never know, unless, of course, the site gets excavated and evidence emerges. From now, we can only speculate. Another aspect that grabbed Andrew's attention was the fact that the parallel rows appeared to be serpent-like, weaving up or down the main hill or from the main enclosure. In his initial report, Andrew stated, "It's even possible that these zigzagging pairs of stones making up the stone avenues, located on the northern, eastern sides of the tepe, signify the path of snakes, which are seen to descend like living energy into the valley below." This idea is given credence through the fact that carving on the stone seems directed up the hill, as if the direction of movement is downwards through the various sets of gateways. After coming to this conclusion, Andrew dreamt of snakes, their tails tied together, each one trying to break free of its bondage, all of them writhing about in the process. With this dream came the impression that the snakes represented the containment, flow, and energy of the stone's avenues at Karahantepe. An interesting concept, if nothing else. Earth energy springs to mind, as it has been found in Avebury, Brittany and Cornwall that stone avenues mark the path of telluric earth energy currents, with a crossing point often at the centre of the complex, which would naturally congregate on a hilltop. More research needs to be carried out to confirm this hypothesis, but with the serpent symbolism at such a remote site, it could even reveal the origins of geomancy and earth energy science. When they go back in September, they will have some equipment to take readings and dowsing rods to find out if this is the case. Divers working on a submarine project in McDonald Lake in the Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve, Ontario, Canada, discovered a submerged man-made ancient stone structure, possibly 5,000 to 10,000 years old. For some, this is irrefutable evidence of a long-lost civilization that inhabited the region before the last ice age. One or two researchers have linked the discovery to Canada's Stonehenge, a huge 5,000-year-old stone wheel discovered south of Alberta. Who were the people who constructed these mysterious monuments, and what do they represent? The Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve Limited is a privately owned forest comprising 120 square miles in Haliburton County, Ontario, Canada. The owner and manager of the 25,000-hectare Haliburton Forest is Dr. Peter Schlieffenbaum, who inherited it from his father. Recently, various sources on the net carried a story about a submarine survey of McDonald Lake, a popular tourist attraction which apparently took place in 2008. According to the story, during the survey, divers encountered an ancient stone structure which was thought to be proof of the presence of a mysterious ancient culture in the area, life from central Ontario ancestors. Staff at the Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve would often see this unusual stone structure balanced on the top of a rock ledge at a depth of about 40 feet below the present lake level, whilst in the tour submarine, which was in existence for a few years at the site. The structure consists of a 1,000-pound elongated, south-pointing rock sitting on a baseball-sized stone at each side, which in turn rested on a massive slab. Initially, the structure was considered a complex version of a glacial erratic, rocks carried by glaciers thousands of years ago and left where they happened to melt at the end of one of the recent ice ages. However, when various geologists and archaeologists examined images on the subject, some expressed doubts about its natural origin. Their main objection was that the structure has straight edges rather than rounded, which would normally characterize rocks scoured by glaciers. One alternative was that the mysterious structure was man-made, but the problem was, how could that be established? The Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve Limited decided to hire an underwater archaeologist to examine the structure more closely. Apparently, after a brief examination of the structure, this unnamed archaeologist concluded that it was undoubtedly the result of human activity rather than an accident of nature. The company also employed a statistician to calculate the probability of the 7 rocks in the lake falling on top of each other to create what looked like a structure. The statistician determined that the probability of 7 rocks falling into such positions at the right time and place was almost impossible. But if the structure was man-made, what was it? Who built it and when? Some researchers think it resembled the prehistoric stone cairns found throughout the world, which serve as monuments, burial sites, markers for ceremonial land, or even navigational aids. Others think it may be a burial chamber or perhaps a dolmen. Dolmens are a type of single-chamber megalithic tomb, mostly dating from the early Neolithic 4000 to 3000 BC, found in a variety of places throughout the world, but mostly in northwest Europe, particularly in the region of Brittany, France, Britain and Ireland. The thick layer of silt covering some of the surfaces of the structures indicate that they are very old, but beyond that, without further evidence, it was impossible to say when it was built. However, when geologists were consulted on the matter, they apparently pointed to a drought which may have hit eastern North America between 9000 and 7000 BC. At this time, conditions were so dry that water levels in the Great Lakes were as much as 165 feet lower, and inland lakes like McDonald Lake may well have been at least 40 feet lower than their current levels. If the structure of the McDonald Lake is a prehistoric monument of some kind, why was it situated in such a remote place? One theory is that the sparse local population at the time may have been attracted to the spot by lake trout, often described as glacial relics, as they are a holdover from the Ice Age and live mainly in deep, cold water habitats. One geologist suggested that in prehistoric times, McDonald Lake was not a lake at all, but part of an ancient river system, which made an ideal habitat for the trout. But no prehistoric monuments of the cairn or dolmen type exist in the USA, Canada, or anywhere else in the world dated to anywhere near 9000 to 7000 BC. Does that make this structure the oldest in the world, or should the glacial erratic theory be examined further? However attractive these explanations for the Lake McDonald structure being a prehistoric monument are, without further evidence obtained in an independent study or excavation unconnected with the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve Limited, such as contemporary artifacts or signs of man-made tooling marks on the stones, we cannot say this for sure. There are 1 or 2 researchers who have linked the underwater structure at Lake McDonald to a mysterious monument known as Canada's Stonehenge. This would make the Lake McDonald prehistoric structure later in date, say around 3000 BC, though still unique to the area. In his 2008 book, Canada's Stonehenge: Astounding Archaeological Discoveries in Canada, England and Wales, author Gordon R. Freeman puts forward the theory that the ancient structure is a prehistoric calendar. A summary of the book on Freeman's website states, "The discovery of a 5,000-year-old sun temple and an ancient time machine, Stone Age calendar, in Canada led scientist Gordon Freeman to groundbreaking discoveries in Stonehenge. During fieldwork and research from 1986 to 2006, Freeman found striking similarities between the surface geometry of the 2 sites. These similarities push back the boundaries of written history and have far-reaching implications for North American and European history. Could the same mysterious ancient cultures have built Canada's Stonehenge and the Lake McDonald structure? Perhaps they were both related to ancient astronomical observations. Freeman describes what he discovered at the ancient site of Canada's Stonehenge, located in Vulcan County, Alberta, in his book. "I had found an amazingly accurate year-round calendar in this sun temple, marked with rock lines pointing to sunrises and sets at critical dates. I later learned of arguments going on, mainly negative, about whether Stonehenge contained marked observation lines to the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset. By applying what I had learned in Alberta to observing sunrises and sets through Stonehenge, I found that an accurate, entire year-round calendar exists in Stonehenge." The term Canada's Stonehenge refers to the monument known by archaeologists and historians as Majorville Medicine Wheel. There are between 70 and 150 Native American stone structures known as medicine wheels spread over the northern United States and southern Canada. Though each individual structure is unique, the shape of the most common type of medicine wheel resembles that of a wagon wheel lying on its side, with a central cairn from which lines of cobblestone radiate outwards to a surrounding ring of stones. The diameter of medicine wheels, as well as the number and length of their spokes, varies. The largest so far discovered has a diameter of around 80 feet. Occasionally, there will be a break in the outer stone circle to allow a stone pathway or entrance into the center of the structure, and sometimes one of the spokes can be considerably longer than the others, perhaps signifying the importance of the direction in which it's pointing. The dates of these medicine wheels also vary considerably, but it is acknowledged that the oldest so far investigated is the Majorville medicine wheel, which was started around 5,500 years ago. There is no doubt that the wheel may have served some astronomical function, but it is more probable that this would have been part of a wider ritual use, perhaps involving hunting magic or buffalo fertility. This is not to say that Native Americans were not sophisticated enough to build observatories, far from it, but in one sense, to state that the Majorville medicine wheel was built only to make complex astronomical calculations is to apply modern Western ideas from a 21st century technology-dominated era back into the past. This explanation reflects our own concerns with timekeeping, calendars, computers, and space, not necessarily those of the Native Americans who built and used Canada's Stonehenge.
The Maltese archipelago consists of 5 islands in the central Mediterranean Sea. Positioned 60 miles to the south of Sicily, only 3 of these islands are inhabited. Malta Island, which is the largest, along with Gozo and Camino. Malta has a long history going back at least 7,000 years, with a wide range of archaeological remains, from the megalithic temples and underground chambers of prehistory to the Baroque architecture of the medieval period. The most spectacular and enigmatic of the ancient remains on Malta are the Neolithic temples and tombs, built 1,000 years before the pyramids. And Malta has the oldest freestanding stone buildings in the world. One of the most fascinating and mysterious of these megalithic structures is known as the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum. A hypogeum is a subterranean rock-cut chamber of an ancient building, and there are a number of these type of monuments spread across the Mediterranean, in southern France, Sicily, Sardinia, and Crete. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is an underground tomb and temple complex, extending for around 5,380 square feet, and is located in the town of Paola, which is in the south of Malta Island. The site was discovered by accident in 1902 when workers digging cisterns for new houses above broke through the roof of one of the chambers. The first excavations at the site were performed by Father Emmanuel Magri of the Society of Jesus, and later continued by Dr. Temi Zamit, the first curator of Malta's museums department. Between 1905 and 1911, Zamit excavated a fascinating collection of archaeological material from the complex, including human remains, pottery, beads, amulets, and figurines, and he wrote a series of reports of his work at the site that was published from 1910 onward. The Hypogeum was first opened to the public in 1908, while excavations were still taking place. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum consists of a series of oval chambers, halls, and niches, set on 3 levels, one underneath the other. Incredibly, the underground structures were all carved out of solid rock in semi-darkness, allegedly using stone mallets and antler picks, and later smoothed over using flint implements. The upper level of the complex consists of a hollow with a central passageway, with burial chambers cut into the natural caves on each side. This is the oldest level of the Hypogeum, in use from 3600 BC to 3300 BC, and is similar in plan to earlier rock-cut tombs found elsewhere on the islands, such as the Shemshia tombs, which date to around 4000 BC. The middle level, 3300 to 3000 BC, was cut into the subsurface rock as an extension of the upper level of the structure. This level exhibits exquisite stoneworking skill in the elaborately carved trilithons, which are a construction with two upright posts, with a horizontal one set on top. The trilithons are set in imitation of the built masonry of the above-ground megalithic structures found elsewhere on Malta. This level also contains some of the most important features of the Hypogeum monument, such as the main chamber, the oracle room, and the Holy of the Holies. Most of the wall surfaces in the main chamber originally had a wash of red ochre, tracing out spiral and honeycomb designs, some of which are still visible today. The famous Sleeping Lady, a 12-centimeter-long reclining terracotta figure with traces of red ochre, was recovered either from here or a nearby room which is known as the Snake Pit. Believed to date from around 3000 BC, this corpulent ceramic figure is naked to the waist and wears a fringed skirt. She appears to be in a deep, tranquil sleep on a bed with a rush mattress, along with other similar figurines from the Neolithic sites on Malta and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. The Sleeping Lady has been used as evidence for the theory of universal peace-loving Mother Goddess, or Great Goddess worship in prehistory, proposed by a number of researchers. One interesting theory regarding the Sleeping Lady, whether goddess or not, is that either in a trance or asleep, she may represent a place in the Hypogeum where dreams or trance visions were interpreted by priests or priestesses. Such a dark subterranean context would have been ideal for the stimulation of such states as it would induce dreams and visions. Alternatively, because the area was used for burials, the statue may be a representation of eternal sleep. The enigmatic Sleeping Lady figurine is now on display at the National Museum of Archaeology in Valletta, the capital city of Malta. Also on the middle level, the roughly rectangular oracle room has an elaborately decorated ceiling of ochre-painted spirals and a fascinating side chamber, which has the property to amplify and echo a deep human voice. This is referred to as a resonance chamber. Whether this intriguing effect was intentional or not is difficult to say, though the possibility that these strange acoustics were utilized in some religious ceremonies performed in the chambers is an intriguing one. The chamber resonates at an intriguing 111 Hz, which is known to be a healing frequency. Immersing yourself in this frequency can help increase the healing process of internal and external wounds. The Holy of the Holies is perhaps the most elaborately decorated room in the whole complex, with its trilithon door frame and pierced stone or porthole entrance, reflecting the architecture of Maltese freestanding Neolithic monuments. The third and lowest level at the Hypogeum is 35 feet below street level and has been dated to 3150 to 2500 BC. It consists of a maze of chambers, which were filled with water when discovered in the early 1900s. As there have been no finds of either bones or artifacts from this level, it has been suggested that these chambers here may have been designed as storage for water or grain. Water storage has also been put forward as the possible function of the Hypogeum at Knossos on Crete, dated between 2150 and 2000 BC. The primary function of the Hypogeum site was certainly as a cemetery, as around 7,000 skeletons have been found in the chambers, ranging in date from 3600 to 2500 BC, in other words, spanning the life of the site itself. This amount of human remains is significantly higher than the tombs could have housed at any one period, indicating, along with the dates of the skeletons, that the complex was used for burials over several centuries. The fact that no human remains were discovered in some rooms, such as the Holy of Holies, would suggest other functions for these parts of the site, Perhaps they were used for funerary rituals involving priests contacting the ancestors. An interesting clue to one of the original functions of the Hypogeum is the resemblance of the site to natural caves. The near darkness of the original subterranean chambers and passageways is a little difficult to imagine nowadays with the brightness of the artificial lighting at the site. But originally, whoever was allowed to venture down into the depths of the Hypogeum would only have had the dim light of animal fat lamps to help them through the maze of rooms, passageways, and niches. Perhaps what took place inside the Hypogeum involved some kind of procession or ritual initiation through the disorienting labyrinth structure, which included passing through porthole entrances into particularly restricted shrines. Such a mysterious subterranean structure as the Hypogeum is bound to generate its own legends and folklore. Indeed, there are a host of legendary tales associated with the Hypogeum, from disappearing parties of school children to subterranean monsters and underground alien bases. The majority of these stories can be traced back to an article by Richard Walter in the August 1940 edition of the National Geographic magazine entitled Wanderers Awheel in Malta. This wartime piece discusses the various underground passageways on Malta being used as part of the fortifications and defense system of the island. It also states that at one time it was possible to traverse the island using these tunnels, but the government closed the entrances to these tunnels after school children and their teachers became lost in the labyrinth while on a study tour and never returned. Apparently, the parents of the children claimed they could hear cries of the children for weeks afterwards, coming from under the ground in several parts of the island, as if some strange phenomena was beckoning others to their doom. In this single article from the National Geographic lies the origin of a host of contemporary folklore about disappearances and secret tunnels underneath the Hypogeum, which has been mostly built up on the internet. The problem is that the original National Geographic article cites no sources for the tale, and no contemporary accounts of the tragedy have ever been discovered. The Hypogeum is not mentioned by name in the article, so we are not even sure if the alleged incident even occurred there. The story has the ring of local folklore, perhaps a tale concocted to keep children away from the dangerous tunnels. It also brings to mind the mysterious disappearance of the Australian schoolgirls in Joan Lindsay's novel, Picnic at Hanging Rock, 1967, for many years believed to be a true incident, despite the protestations of the author of the novel. Thanks to a number of stories published first in the 1960s and copied on the internet over the past decade or so, the folklore of the alleged Hypogeum disappearance has taken on a life of its own. According to these stories, which conveniently don't cite any sources, 30 children vanished with their teachers while on a study tour of the Hypogeum. New elements, with no foundation in fact whatsoever, were added to the archaeology of the Hypogeum site itself to make the supposed disappearance more lurid. So we have 30,000 bodies discovered by archaeologists in the chambers, not 7,000. And the remains were all human sacrifices to some underworld god. In the best traditions of the modern folklore of underground archaeological sites, the tunnels underneath the Hypogeum are said to stretch for hundreds of miles, all the way to the catacombs underneath Rome. Improving on the original National Geographic article, we are told that a British embassy worker, or in some accounts, an American tourist, called Miss Lois Jessup, discovered a series of tunnels underneath the lower level of the Hypogeum, and in an unexplored cavern, she encountered several large hairy creatures with strange powers. Apparently, she later learned that this was the same cavern where the children and their teachers had disappeared sometime in the 1940s, after which the entrance of the Hypogeum was sealed off and nobody was allowed to investigate the site. From working at the British Embassy, Miss Lois Jessup went on to become secretary of the New York Flying Saucer Information Bureau. The sources for these bizarre stories include a 1960s printed lecture by one-time director of Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, Riley Crabb, called The Reality of the Cavern World, and a chapter, Malta, Entrance to the Cavern World, in a 1966 book entitled Enigma Fantastique by W. Gordon Allen, essentially a reprint of the Crabb article. There is one element of these bizarre legends about the Hypogeum that has some truth to it, however. The site was indeed closed for a number of years between 1992 and 1996, though not because of any mysterious disappearance in its tunnels. The reason was that major conservation work was being carried out due to the damage being done to the limestone walls by years of visitors exhaling carbon dioxide in the enclosed space. To protect against this damage, numbers are now restricted to 80 pre-booked visitors per day, and a microclimate has been installed above the underground chambers to regulate air temperature and humidity. In 1980, the fascinating Hal Saflieni Hypogeum was added to UNESCO's World Heritage List. Strangely enough, when now visiting the Hypogeum, visitors are not permitted to photograph, film, or even take audible recordings, while security guards watch over a controlled small group of 20 visitors. Many researchers ponder, why is that, and is there something that is being kept away from the public?
Recent research in Brazil has revealed the discovery of an ancient megalithic observatory built at least 5 centuries before the European conquest of the Americas began. This finding, along with other archaeological fascinating discoveries in Brazil in recent years, which include giant land carvings, remains of fortified settlements, and complex road networks, are challenging the earlier views that the Amazon had been untouched by humans except for small nomadic tribes. Nearly all the discoveries were made after a period of widespread deforestation in the Amazon in the early 90s through to the mid-2000s. The archaeology of the Amazon. For decades, the Amazon was thought by archaeologists to have been almost uninhabited rainforest, but recently were made after a period of widespread deforestation in the Amazon in the early 90s through to the mid-2000s. The archaeology of the Amazon. For decades, the Amazon was thought by archaeologists to have been almost uninhabited rainforest, but recently researchers have been finding new evidence that the area was in fact a hive of human activity and home to millions of people. In March 2018, a study funded by National Geographic and the European Research Council Project PAST revealed details of 81 sites in the previously unexplored territory of the Amazon's upper Tapajós basin. Settlements discovered in the area ranged from small villages of around 100 feet wide to a large site covering 19 hectares. The sites were first discovered by satellite imagery of the area revealed by deforestation. The remains of the settlements are represented by ditches enclosing the sites for fortification, sunken roads, and earth platforms on which houses would once have stood. Dr. Jonas Gregoria de Souza from the University of Exeter was the first author of the study. He said regarding the findings and the distribution of the sites, the idea that the Amazon was a pristine forest, untouched by humans, home to scattered nomadic populations, we already know that was not true. The big debate is how populations were distributed in pre-Columbian times in the Amazon. The idea was that in the areas that are located further away from the main rivers, populations maybe were actually smaller and they had a negligible impact on the environment. We demonstrated that these regions may have had pretty large populations as well as in the past. Wood charcoal associated with pottery fragments from one site was carbon dated to between 1410 and 1460 AD, which fits in well with the dating of many of the sites previously discovered in the southern rim of the Amazon, which showed a peak of activity between 1250 and 1500. Models based on the team's research indicate that at the time, the southern rim of the Amazon alone could have had a population of between 500,000 and 1 million people. However, this population was soon to be decimated by the arrival of Europeans. According to de Souza, diseases traveled much faster than people, and probably this population was already weakened by diseases brought by Europeans even before the Europeans set foot in the area. The Brazilian Stonehenge. The Solstice Archaeological Park is located near the city of Calçone in Amapá State, northern Brazil. The site contains a megalithic stone circle and is often referred to as the Amazon Stonehenge or the Brazilian Stonehenge. The megalithic site, which is located on a hilltop on the bank of the Rio Grande River, consists of 127 upright blocks of granite, each of up to 13 feet in diameter and weighing several tons, standing evenly paced in a circle measuring over 98 feet in diameter. After conducting radiocarbon testing and carrying out measurements during the winter solstice at the site, some scholars in the field of archaeoastronomy determined that an indigenous culture arranged the megaliths into an astronomical observatory about 1,000 years ago, or 5 centuries before the European conquest of the Americas began, and 3,500 years after the building of Stonehenge. Archaeologists theorize that the site, referred to in academic sources as APCA-18, was constructed by a sophisticated indigenous people for astronomical, ceremonial, or burial purposes, or even a combination of all three. One of the stones at the site has a circular hole carved into it. During the winter solstice, the sun shines directly through this hole onto another rock, supporting the idea that the Amazonian Stonehenge was used as an astronomical site. According to the New York Times, the site was discovered by a cattle rancher named Lealsan Camilo de Silva. Apparently, de Silva was removing trees in the late 1990s to make land for his cattle to graze on when he discovered the stones. In reality, de Silva already knew they were there, having initially found them in the 60s, but he said he had avoided the site because he felt that it was sacred. Recently, hundreds of huge earthworks known as geoglyphs have been discovered in western Brazil, revealing the last remnants of land used by ancient societies before the dense foliage of the Amazon rainforest concealed them centuries ago. The peak period of forest burning to clear land happened between 2300 and 1400 years ago, during which the first earthworks are believed to have been constructed. While the form and extent of these sites can be determined using aerial observations, researchers are still not sure what the original purpose of the sites was. Many of the structures are unlikely to have been villages, as excavation at the sites has not revealed the substantial amounts of cultural artifacts which would be expected if they had been habitation sites. The layout of the sites also suggests that they weren't built for defensive purposes. One explanation which has been put forward is that the areas were used for ritual gatherings of some kind, and so would have been visited only intermittently by those who once lived in the area. Archaeologist Jennifer Watling has compared the layout of the sites with England's Stonehenge, saying, "It's interesting to note that the format of the geoglyphs, with an outer ditch and inner wall enclosure, are what are classically described as henge sites. The earliest phases at Stonehenge consisted of a similarly laid out enclosure." The latest discovery in the Amazon. In November 2020, it was announced in the press that one of the world's largest collections of prehistoric rock art had been discovered in the Amazonian rainforest. The discovery, described as the Sistine Chapel of the Ancients, consisted of tens of thousands of paintings of animals and humans created up to 12,500 years ago on cliff faces stretching across nearly 8 miles in Colombia. The date of the artwork was based partially on images of now extinct Ice Age animals, such as the mastodon, a prehistoric relative of the elephant that had been extinct in South America for at least 12,000 years. There are also depictions of Paleolama, an extinct camelid, as well as giant sloths and Iron Age horses, all seen at first hand and painted by some of the very first humans ever to reach the Amazon. Other images include fish, turtles, lizards and birds, as well as people dancing and holding hands, with one figure wearing a mask resembling a bird with a beak. The incredible discovery was filmed for a major Channel 4 series called Jungle Mystery: Lost Kingdoms of the Amazon. The documentary's presenter, archaeologist and explorer Ella Al-Shamahi, said of the extraordinary findings, "This site is so new they haven't even given it a name yet." The discovery was made by a British Columbian team funded by the European Research Council. The researchers' team leader, a professor of archaeology at Exeter University and a leading expert on the Amazon and pre-Columbian history, said, "When you're there, your emotions flow. We're talking about several tens of thousands of paintings. It's going to take generations to record them. Every turn you do, it's a new wall of paintings. We started seeing animals that are now extinct. The pictures are so natural and so well made that we have few doubts that you're looking at a horse, for example. The Ice Age horse has a wild, heavy face. It's so detailed, we can even see the horsehair. It's fascinating." The site of the discovery is so remote that after a 2-hour drive, a team of archaeologists and filmmakers had to trek on foot for around 4 hours to find it. Even after arriving at the site, the team found that some of the paintings were placed so high up that they could only be viewed with drones. Al-Shamahi remarked on the incredible depiction of Ice Age life in the Amazon as suggested by the newly discovered paintings. "One of the most fascinating things was seeing Ice Age megafauna because that's a marker of time. I don't think people realize that the Amazon has shifted in the way it looks. It hasn't always been a rainforest. When you look at a horse or mastodon in these paintings, of course, they weren't going to live in a forest. They're too big. Not only are they giving clues about when they were painted by some of the earliest people, that in itself is just mind-boggling. But they're also giving clues about what this very spot might have looked like. More savanna-like." For centuries, there have been tales of beings, some human and some not, living in the vast cavities that exist deep beneath the surface of the Earth. But exactly who or what these beings are and what they want is open to question. Sometimes these tales are based on half-remembered rumors, and there has seldom been anything definite. But there are also ancient structures, such as the necropolis called the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta, that helps corroborate such tales. This strange subterranean construction, which dates from around 4000 BCE, is one of Europe's only known Neolithic underground dwellings. Elsewhere, there are several others, including Derinkuyu in Turkey, the underground city of Neyaz in northern France, and of course the fascinating and hauntingly beautiful city of Petra in southern Jordan. Strange indeed, but at least we know they exist. However, there are others that are more questionable, particularly those that hint at the existence of long-lost technologies. One of these is the legendary city of Shin Au Av that is said to lie deep below Death Valley, a vast and barren area that straddles the California-Nevada border in the USA. This strange hidden city, whose name means God's land or Ghostland, is thought to have contained many anomalous and out-of-place artifacts that should not belong to the era in which it was supposedly built. There are two versions of how this underground city came to being, although they may be closely interlinked. One version implies that it is linked to a race that existed at the dawn of time and had a presence worldwide. They were called the Serpent People. In India, they were known as the Naga, or snakes, and at the Quetzalcoatl, or plumed serpent, in ancient Mexico. The ancient Egyptians called them the Jedhai, and the Chinese knew them as lung or dragons. In ancient Britain, they were called adders, or the serpents of wisdom. Appropriately enough, the name adder is also given to a species of poisonous snake that is indigenous to areas of the UK. It doesn't seem to matter which race encountered them, because they were invariably worshipped and regarded as helpers and prophets. All of the legends that say this mysterious race could either take human or reptilian form, and as is the way with reptiles and snakes, lived below the surface and created underground cities worldwide. Under the guidance of these serpent people, dragon cultures developed, which normally involved the construction of huge pyramids and other structures covered with serpent motifs. These cultures were hand-ruled by benevolent dragon kings, and even today signs of vanished races are still evident. In fact, these legends associated with the Paiute tribe resonate strongly with other Native American tribes, notably the Hopi and Zuni peoples, whose creation legends also tell of their ancestors' emergence from the dark, subterranean world. It is unlikely that at the dawn of time these people would have direct contact, so it's strange how closely their legends have become intermingled. For many centuries, the legends of the Paiute tribe of North America have told of this lost city, also referred to as the Ghostland. According to legend, Shin-Au-Av was formed when a young god, Shino-Avakates, was asked to take a sealed bag across the desert and only open it when he got to the other side. But because he was young and he felt movement inside the bag, the god became curious and opened it, allowing the contents, in this case hordes of human beings, to escape. These people, who eventually became known by the name of the god Shino-Av, saw some mountains in the distance and ran towards them. One of the older gods saw this and demanded to know why he had done this, and a furious row developed. According to the legend, the people heard the heated exchange but could see nothing, so they became afraid and dug a tunnel and hid in it, which is how the underground city was created. These events became part of Paiute creation legends and were adopted into their belief of an afterlife. Another part of this legend tells of how, many centuries later, the wife of a Paiute chief died in childbirth, and in his grief he wanted to be reunited with her, so traveled to the land of the dead. This involved passing through a miles-long underground passage, and on his journey he was attacked by the fearsome creatures that lived there. Finally, he got to the end of the passage and found himself standing at the end of a narrow bridge carved from the solid rock. The bridge crossed what he looked like a bottomless chasm. He crossed the bridge and finally arrived in the land of the dead, which was ruled over by Shino-Av. One of the inhabitants met him, a strangely beautiful female with snake-like features, who took him into a huge open area. Here he saw thousands of dead members of his tribe dancing. He asked if his wife was with them. His guide told him she was, and that once he had found her, they must both immediately leave the valley, and, common with Lot's wife in the Bible, should not any account look back for any reason. The chief promised to do this, and he watched the dancers for several hours until he saw his wife. He called out to her and she turned and saw him. She left the dancers and ran towards him, and they promptly fled to the rock ridge, leaving from Shiv-O-Av to the cavern and the world above. However, he forgot his promise and turned to take one look back at where he'd been, and as he did so, his wife and the city immediately disappeared. Once he had recovered from the shock, he made his way out of the cavern and rejoined his tribe. He spent the rest of his life describing the peace, happiness, and beauty that he had found in the underground land. Legends like this were forgotten until, in 1947, they resurfaced when an article appeared in the San Diego Union Tribune. The article mentioned that several years previously, the remains of an ancient civilization had been found in the desert. These remains included an underground city containing gigantic skeletons and mummies wearing leather clothing, and the walls of the city were covered with strange carvings and images. This article also stated that in 1931, an archaeologist had located tunnels leading to the city underneath Death Valley, and he intended to excavate and explore his find. He said that work had already started removing the skeletons from the caverns, most of which were between 8 and 9 feet long. The article also suggested that out-of-place artifacts had been found, indicating that there was a level of technology present that was unlike the rest of the find. Like the mummies, the skeletons were still clad in garments, but these were made of hair, and the garments were of medium length, comprising a jacket and knee-length trousers. Initial testing suggested that the remains were in the region of 80,000 years old. It was also stated that another cavern had been found. This cavern, which they called the Temple, had apparently been used for ceremonies or rituals, and it contained objects and strange markings familiar to those used by the Freemasons. A long tunnel from this area led to another room containing the remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, elephants, and other animals, which were displayed in alcoves in the walls. The men got the impression that some catastrophe had occurred above ground and people had taken refuge in this elaborate cave system. The dwellings were well equipped, and among the articles found were objects that they could not recognize, and it was not until after 1947 that they were found to be microwave ovens. Furthermore, it appeared that the city had been lit using a form of gas lighting which had been fueled by sources of natural gas. Elsewhere, there were huge stone doors that seemed to have been operated using a complex system of counterweights. This took the form of hundreds of globes dotted around the cave system. The globes contained pieces of stone that was found to be mildly radioactive and is thought that at one time may have provided a light source. In addition to this, other totally out-of-place devices resembling radio sets were also found. However, a few days after the first article appeared in the San Diego Union Tribune, another article entitled "Expedition Reports 9-Foot Skeletons" appeared in another Nevada newspaper, the now-defunct Hot Citizen. Some view this as no more than something created by a reporter, while others believe the evidence is there and is being kept from the general public. One account from the early 1900s alleges that two men were traveling through Death Valley and one of them allegedly fell into an old mine shaft at a place called Wingate Pass. Fortunately, he was not badly injured and could see odd shapes nearby. He called out to his companion, who climbed down to join him. They found themselves in a cavern which they claimed to have followed about 20 miles into the heart of the Panamint Mountains. They claimed to have found themselves in another cavern containing a huge ancient underground city. They continued exploring and discovered that they had climbed some distance into the mountains, and although still underground, they could see openings some distance above the ground that led outside. They looked and realized that the valley below had once been underwater and that the openings appeared to have once been designed to allow vessels to moor alongside. They realized that the valley was once underwater, and they eventually came to the conclusion that the arched openings had been ancient docks for seagoing vessels. The area around Wingate Pass, where the discoveries were made later, became part of the US Navy weapons testing facility at China Lake and is now off limits to the public and is currently impossible to check if any of these claims are accurate. However, governments will always conceal inconvenient evidence from the public. They've done this for decades, and this practice shows no signs of stopping anytime soon. The Dashka stone is a controversial artifact that is believed by some to be the guidelines used by the architect of the world. Known as the Map of the Creator, the stone tablet has baffled researchers since its discovery in 1999. As impossible as it may seem, Russian experts believe the stone map could be 120 million years old. The Dashka slab depicts not only the environs of the Ural Mountains, but also a series of civil engineering projects, including 7,457 miles of channels, several dams, and hieroglyphic notations of unknown origin. The accuracy and perspective of the map suggests that it was created from an aerial point of observation. The hieroglyphs have not, as of this time of writing, been deciphered, but are thought to be related to an ancient form of Chinese. Archaeologists from the Bashkir State University discovered the Dashka stone in the Ural Mountains of eastern Russia on July 21, 1999. The discoverers were immediately struck by the size of the tablet. It measures 58 inches high, 42 inches wide and 6 inches thick, and weighs 1 ton. Upon further examination, the researchers were even more stunned. The tablet appears to show a highly accurate topographical map of Bashkiria, a specific area of the Ural Mountains at a scale of approximately 1 to 1.1 kilometers. Alexander Churov, a professor at Bashkir State University who led the team, named the stone Dashka in honor of his grandfather, who was born on that day. He said, at first sight, I understood that this was not a simple stone piece, but a real map, and not a single map, but a three-dimensional. You can see it yourself. The map of the Creator is comprised of 3 levels, strongly suggesting that it didn't originate in nature but was artificially made. The first layer is roughly 7 inches of a cement or ceramic compound based on dolomite. The second layer is roughly 1 inch of diopside glass enriched with silicon. The third layer is only a few millimeters thick and is made of calcium porcelain mixture, perhaps to give the tablet added protection or perhaps to create a diffused light to better illuminate the stone. "How did we manage to identify the place?" said Churyov. "At first, we couldn't imagine the map was so ancient. Happily, relief of today's Bashkiria has not changed so much within millions of years. We could identify Ufa Height, while Ufa Canyon is the main point of our proofs, because we carried out geological studies and found its track where it must be according to the ancient map. Displacement of the canyon happened because of tectonic slabs which moved from east. The group of Russian and Chinese specialists in the field of cartography, physics, mathematics, geology, chemistry, and Old Chinese language managed to precisely find out that the slab contains the map of the Ural region, with the rivers Belya, Ufimka, Sutolka. You can also see Ufa Canyon, the break of the Earth's crust stretched out from the city of Ufa to the city of Sterlitimak. At the moment, Urshak River runs over the former canyon. The Dashka stone undoubtedly points to a Ural civilization more advanced than previously suspected. However, the claims that it was made 120 million years ago by a geographic creator are most likely false. The Bashkir researchers derived this date from a pair of ancient seashells found locked in the stone slab. The first shell could be as old as 500 million years old. The second shell could be as old as 120 million years. Why these shells, still intact, were incorporated into the tablet, or if they were purposely included at all, they cannot be known for certain. Scientists suspect that, aside from the ancient shells, the tablet was made approximately 3,000 years ago. However, it's exceedingly difficult to radiocarbon date the engravings themselves. Great attention has been paid to the variety of magnificent megalithic structures around the world. Yet very little is reported on a mysterious and impressive set of stone structures that can be found in the Ural Mountains of Russia. In the Sverdlovsk Oblast region in the Middle Urals, there can be found numerous dolmens. According to controversial descriptions, a dolmen is a type of single-chambered megalithic tomb. However, there is really no evidence to suggest that they were initially constructed as tombs. Rather, it seemed that subsequent civilizations chose to use them for this purpose. Dolmens are usually comprised of two or more vertical stones supporting a flat horizontal stone on top. There can be variations ranging from relatively simple to very complex. The dolmens in the Urals are considered to be small compared to other dolmens, ranging from approximately 1.5 to 2.5 meters in width and length. There is some variance in the dolmens of the Urals with two distinct styles. The stone plate dolmens are created with a mound of stones that have an attached chamber. These usually have a square court in front and are sometimes surrounded by smaller stones. The boulder dolmens are constructed from large boulders that form a chamber. The chamber is covered by one or more flat stones. There is some variation in structure of the boulder dolmens, but they all have two entrance points, a main entrance to the side and a smaller entrance between boulders. The menhirs are the most typical type of megalith found in the Urals. A menhir is a single vertical stone. They can be found singularly as a monolith or in groups. The menhirs found in the Urals include monoliths in groupings and tend to be roughly finished. All of the monoliths discovered to this point are located near either a settlement or a cemetery from the Bronze Age, 3300 to 600 BC. Some of the menhir groups are in rows, 13 to 18 meters long. A circular-shaped structure was discovered at the village of Akhunovo in Bashkiria. 8 menhirs are formed into a circular shape that is approximately 25 meters in diameter. While the dolmens and menhirs are amazing and mysterious structures themselves, the most amazing find in the Urals are the megaliths of Vera Island in Lake Turguyak. Dating to the Eneolithic period, these megaliths are referred to as Megalith number 1, Megalith number 2, Megalith number 3, Vera Island 9, and Vera Island 4. Megalith number 1 is the largest megalith structure on the island, standing at 16 by 9 meters. It's cut into the bedrock and covered with capstones. It's orientated towards the west and includes a long entrance, a central hall, and 2 chambers with a connecting corridor. It includes windows and sculptures of bulls and wolves. It's speculated that megalith number 1 served as a temple at some point. Megalith number 2, pictured in the feature image, was found carved into a rocky slope with a mound structure covering it. It's orientated north and contained 2 chambers connected by a corridor. Megalith number 3 is created by large boulders with a square pit cut into the center rock. It's closed off by vertical stone slabs with massive boulders as capstones. Vera Island 9 is a cultic ritual place with 2 menhirs, while Vera Island 4 is a cultic place surrounded by vertical stones with a small menhir in the center. The megaliths of the Urals are undoubtedly an impressive sight, yet strangely, virtually nothing is known about who created them, how they were built, or what purpose they were intended to serve. The megaliths stretch across an immense area of land, suggesting that they were not all created by a single group. Megalith number 1 on Vera Island is believed to have been a temple at some point. However, other megaliths present no obvious signs that they were used for any religious purposes. Nevertheless, it's possible that the megaliths had a common use in spite of the variances in size and shape. It's hoped that further archaeological research may help to unravel the mysteries of these spectacular structures, as well as the civilization that created them many millennia ago. A few years ago, when officials in Turkey went to investigate flooding in the Nevşehir province, they uncovered a vast, massive network of underground tunnels. Recent research has revealed that these tunnels from a subterranean city may date back 5,000 years. The massive web of man-made tunnels and caverns extends 3 miles underground and contains 3 stories of homes, places of worship, and areas for mass congregation. It's now believed to be the biggest underground city ever built. Fascinatingly, it is only one of perhaps 200 mysterious underground cities in the Cappadocia region of Turkey. The discovery. Recently, an announcement was made in the media that shocked the archaeological world. The world's oldest underground city had been discovered in Turkey, partly submerged underwater. The discovery of the ancient city was made in the province of Nevşehir in Cappadocia, a semi-arid region of central Turkey. It took place when around 1,500 houses in 11 neighborhoods around an ancient Byzantine citadel in central Nevşehir were being demolished by the Housing Development Administration, TOKİ, to start a new urban project. The director of TOKİ, Mehmet Ergun Turan, said, "We stopped the construction we were planning to do on these areas when an underground city was discovered." Initial examination found roughly 4.3 miles long underground city of 3 floors, consisting of houses, tunnels, churches, wine cellars, food storage areas and galleries. The mayor of Nevşehir, Hazar Unver, commented on the huge importance of the find. He said, "The underground city was found in the 45 hectares of the local 75-hectare area that is within the Urban Transformation Project. We applied to the Cultural and Natural Heritage Preservation Board and the area was officially registered. It has a 7-kilometer road dotted with churches, galleries and other structures. It's estimated that the city dates back to the era of the Hittites, similar to other underground cities. We are now working to make it open for visitors. We will build walking platforms inside and a large park will be built on the surface. The other underground cities in Nevşehir's various districts do not even amount to the kitchen of this new underground city." Realizing the immense importance of the discovery of the Nevşehir city, authorities abruptly halted the housing project and called in archaeologists and geophysicists who began investigating on the site. Özgen Kakia, an associate professor at the Çanakkale 18th March University, who was involved in the excavations, believed that the tunnels at the site were used to carry agricultural products. He said, "We believe that people who were engaged in agriculture were using the tunnels to carry agricultural products to the city. We also estimate that one of the tunnels passes under Nevşehir and reaches a faraway water source." Indeed, most academics believe that the huge network of underground houses and tunnels was home to thousands of people who were part of a farming community that existed around 3000 BC. Local folklore talks of an underground city in the area which people call Giagor, which translates into English as enter and see. Geophysicists from Nevşehir University conducted a detailed survey of the site and found it to cover almost 5 million square feet. The survey also suggests that the underground corridors may reach down as deep as 371 feet, which would make it the largest of all underground cities. Mayor Hasan Unver commented on the results of the extensive archaeological work being carried out at the site. He said, "We have reached 7-kilometer-long galleries, unearthed a normal living space, as well as a 12th century rock-carved church, a 6th century monastery, and mosque-like religious places, which date back to the Seljuk era. We've also found horse barns where military horses had been cared for. In addition, we found 4 oil houses and hundreds of tobacco pipes made of meerschaum. Everything here is under our control." The newly discovered site at Nevşehir lies beneath the Byzantine-era hilltop castle in an area which is home to countless subterranean settlements of varying sizes and possibly of varying dates as well. Derinkuyu. The largest of these is in the Derinkuyu district, just over 18 miles from Nevşehir, and goes down to a depth of approximately 197 feet, equal to the height of an 8th-story building, and large enough to accommodate around 20,000 people. The massive underground city has thousands of ventilation shafts and water channels which provided fresh air and water to each level of the site. Derinkuyu was probably first established around the 7th or 8th century BC, most likely as protection against invading forces. The city was protected by doors which consisted of massive stone wheels that could be rolled into place to block an entrance. One of Derinkuyu's most interesting features is a large room with vaulted ceilings, which is believed to have been a religious school with a separate study room. Derinkuyu was also connected to other underground cities in the region through a sophisticated network of tunnels. These enigmatic underground cities in Cappadocia were carved into the soft volcanic rock thousands of years ago. But as stone is non-organic, it's difficult to accurately date these cities. They may have been originated during the Hittite period from 1600 to 1200 BC, or even earlier. They're often attributed to the Phrygians, an ancient people of west-central Anatolia, whose most famous king was Midas of the Golden Touch. The state of Phrygia arose in the region in the 8th century BC. Since ancient times, Turkey has been a major trade hub between Asia and Europe, and thus has been invaded and conquered repeatedly by different peoples over thousands of years. Consequently, the purpose of these underground cities is usually connected with concealment from invaders. The most active period of inhabitation of these subterranean worlds was during the Byzantine period from 395 AD to 1453 AD, when regular invasions by foreign armies forced locals to hide underground. Many of these cities continued in use right up until the 20th century, when people hid there to save themselves from persecution during the Ottoman Empire. In fact, it was not until 1923, after the population exchange between Greece and Turkey, that these underground cities were finally abandoned and not rediscovered until 1963. At the moment, Derinkuyu is the largest excavated underground city in the world, but many believe that when Nevşehir is fully excavated, that title may well change hands. Makli. There are a staggering 200 or more underground towns and cities in Cappadocia, many of which are wholly or partly open to the public. One of the best known of them is Makli underground town, located about 12 miles from Nevşehir and built under the hill known as the Citadel of Makli. It's connected to Derinkuyu by miles of ancient tunnels and was open to visitors as early as 1964. The subterranean town consists of 8 floors, 4 of which are open to the public today. The spaces in the underground town, which are organized around ventilation shafts, were made into stables, storage rooms, wineries, and kitchens. Archaeologists believe this underground village could have been a temporary home for up to 3,500 people. On the third level of the settlement, archaeologists discovered an unusual block of andesite, which was used by the ancient inhabitants for cold-forming copper. The ancient name of the town was Enigup, and experts believe construction may have begun by the Phrygians in the 8th to 7th centuries BC. It was used much later in the Byzantine era for protection against Muslim Arabs during the Arab-Byzantine Wars of 780 to 1180 AD. The modern village on the site is built almost around 100 tunnels of the underground city. These tunnels are still used today by the villagers as storage areas, stables and cellars, accessed via the courtyards of the houses in the village. There is actually an astonishing eyewitness account of these underground Cappadocian cities, which gives us a vivid idea of what they must have been like. It was written in 370 BC by the ancient Greek professional soldier and writer Xenophon, and tells of the expedition of a large army of Greek mercenaries hired by Persian Prince Cyrus the Younger to help him seize the throne of Persia from his brother. During their travels, they came upon a strange village somewhere in Anatolia, modern Turkey, which Xenophon describes as follows. The houses were underground, with a mouth like that of a well, but spacious below, and while entrances were tunneled down for the beasts of burden, the human inhabitants descended by ladder. In the houses were goats, sheep, cattle, fowl, and their young, and all the animals were reared and took their fodder there in the houses. Here were also wheat, barley and beans, and barley wine in large bowls. Floating on the top of this drink were the barley grains, and in it were straws, some larger and others smaller, without joints, and when one was thirsty, one had to take these straws into his mouth and suck. It was an extremely strong drink unless one diluted it with water, and extremely good when one was used to it. Researchers believe they have uncovered the first clear example of a treasure the ancient Egyptians brought home with them from the legendary lost land of Punt. It is a 3,300-year-old baboon skull, a remnant of animal that was revered in ancient Egypt but was not native to the land of the pharaohs. The legendary treasures of Punt. The ancient Egyptians wrote about the land of Punt and depicted it as a prosperous location from 2450 BC to 1155 BC. They went to Punt, which they referred to as God's land, to acquire gold, African blackwood, ebony, ivory, aromatic raisins, wild animals, and slaves. One of the most famous artworks created about this location is the Punt colonnade on Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, demonstrating that her people brought her myrrh trees, gold, ivory, panther skins, and apes back from Punt. The travels to Punt for treasures also demonstrate the ancient Egyptians' nautical skills. Nathaniel Dominy, a primatologist at Dartmouth College and lead author of the new study, explained that the long-distance seafaring between Egypt and Punt, two sovereign entities, was a major milestone in human history because it drove the evolution of maritime technology. Trade in exotic luxury goods, including baboons, was the engine behind early nautical innovations. Archaeologists believe that the land of the Punt was a real place. However, there is still a debate about where it was actually located. Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia are just a few of the proposed locations. This is why researchers have taken a particular interest in the 3,300-year-old baboon skull. If this baboon really did come from Punt, and they could identify its homeland, the mystery may be solved. Dominy states in a press release, "Many scholars view trade between Egypt and Punt as the first long maritime step in a trade network known as the Spice Route, which would go on to shape geopolitical fortunes for millennia. Other scholars put it more simply, describing the Egypt-Punt relationship as the beginning of economic globalization. Baboons were central to this commerce, so determining the location of Punt is important. For over 150 years, Punt has been a geographic mystery. Domini says our analysis is the first to show how mummified baboons can be used to inform this enduring debate. Analyzing the baboon skull. Even though there are records and artwork listing and depicting the goods Egyptians took from Punt, Science magazine reports that archaeologists have found little hard evidence for treasures from Punt to date. Domini and his colleagues believe that their research will change that. They identified a Hamadryas baboon skull tucked away in the British Museum's archives and think that the fossil that was discovered in Thebes, Luxor, in the 19th century came from Punt. The results of their study, published on eLife, explains that they studied the chemical isotopes in the baboon's tooth enamel to try to pinpoint the animal's birthplace. Isotopic analysis is a useful tool for this endeavor because different places have distinct ratios of strontium isotopes in the soil and water, and this isotopic signature of the place where the animal lives the first years of their life is seen in their tooth enamel, thanks to the water they drink and the foods they consume. No matter where the animal lives later in life, their homeland's isotopic signature remains in their tooth enamel, unaltered by time. The results of the chemical analysis of the baboon skull show that the animal wasn't born in Egypt. In their paper, the researchers write that it came from a region that it encompasses much of present-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti, and portions of Somalia and Yemen. They write that this region corroborates the balance of scholarly conjecture on the location of Punt, and also is a testament to the tremendous reach of Egyptian seafaring during the 2nd millennium BC. Domini says that this implies the baboon is the first known Puntite treasure. According to Science magazine, Catherine Bard, an archaeologist at Boston University, said that the baboon skull study provides another piece of evidence on where Punt was located. Bard believes that Punt is either in Eritrea or eastern Sudan. She also tells Science magazine that this isn't the first example of a treasure from Punt because her excavations at Mersa Wadi Gawasis unearthed obsidian ebony fragments, which she asserts came from Punt. Domini disagreed, saying that ebony, for example, was widely distributed across Africa, so Bard's discovery was not necessarily a treasure from Punt. High-status baboons in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians linked Hamadryas baboons to their god of wisdom and the creator of hieroglyphics, Thoth, and Amun-Ra, the sun god. They considered the animals sacred and depicted them in their sculptures, reliefs, and paintings, even though they're not native animals to Egypt. Egyptologist Dr. Geraldine Pinch has also noted that baboons were connected with Duat, the underworld in ancient Egyptian religion, saying, "The image of the Thoth baboon beside a Wedjat eye occurs on magic wands as early as the 20th century BC. Two baboon form of the god Khons control the Book of the End of the Year. These contain lists of those who were destined to die and those who would live." Anaut Balaji has written that baboons were associated with ancient Egyptian kings too. For example, King Nama is shown as being transformed into a baboon known as the Great White One as part of a rejuvenation festival scene. Bajaji noticed that some scholars opine that the title of this god is derived from the silver-grey mane of a dominant Hamadryas, and individual ancestors were ritually deified in the form of baboons and received cultic offerings. When archaeologists were excavating a dried-up lagoon known as Mersa Goasis, they discovered traces of an ancient harbor that had helped launch early voyages, like Hatshepsut's, onto the open ocean. Man-made caves in the area contain timber, rigging, limestone anchors, steering oars, reed mats, cedar planks, and the remains of one of the oldest sea-going ships ever discovered. These artifacts have offered proof of the Egyptians' nautical skills and also provided important clues to the location of Punt. A more recent discovery adds weight to the evidence that Punt was located somewhere in Africa and not on the Arabian Peninsula. Science in Poland reports that archaeologists and ornithologists have identified a depiction of a bird on the portico of Punti in the Temple of Hatshepsut as a secretary bird, Sagittarius serpentarius, a very large bird of prey found only in Africa, particularly around coastal regions in Sudan. For centuries, the land of Punt has been delegated to the realm of myth and folklore, but more and more recent findings are making it clear that Punt was not a mythical place, it's a real location that is still waiting to be found.